Greg, hello, everybody, and happy Thursday. Welcome to the Texas Balance Estate Landlord Engagement webinar. Um, and we'll do some quick introductions, and then we're going to jump into some landlord engagement content. So excited to be here with all of you. I'll introduce myself first since I'm probably new to most of you. My name is Katie Peterson. I work for the Cloudburst Group. We're a HUD technical assistance firm. I have been working with the Texas Balance Estate for, I don't know, about 2 years now, working on their rural snowfo work with Panhandle Community Services. And one of the, if you don't remember way back when, one of the goals of the rural snowfo um, COC goals was basically to do some landlord engagement. And so with the NOFO was supposed to be happening right now, THN asked me to sort of step in and facilitate. I've done a lot of landlord engagement work, both when I worked at HUD and then also with communities around the country. So excited to be here to facilitate this fantastic group of people. I'm going to have them introduce themselves and just tell you sort of their name, where they're located, their agency, and if there's anything else they want to add. So why don't we start with Audra?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Audra Ray. I'm the Director of Family Services. We cover the top 26 counties of the Texas Panhandle, and we are Panhandle Community Services. And the top 26 counties, if you're unfamiliar, is about 26,000 square miles.
Yep. So lots of landlords in a very, or not so many landlords actually in a very big area. Amy, would you like to say hello?
Good morning. My name is Amy Francis. I'm with Panhandle Community Services as well. I am the Assistant Director of Family Services under Audra. And like she said, we cover the top 26 counties of the Texas Panhandle.
And Sharon?
Good morning. I am Sharon Lee. I am the Landlord Engagement Manager for United Way of Denton County, and we only cover Denton County.
But we're very lucky to have Sharon with us, and before she rides off into the sunset to Kansas. So thanks for being here. And Denisha?
All right, there we go. Good morning, everybody. So, the quick disclaimer, my voice can be a shot of whiskey or a cup of coffee, depending on how you feel right now. So, just want to put that out there. But my name is Denisha Trials. I'm the program manager of coordinated entry and supportive housing at the Gulf Coast Center. We cover Brazoria and Galveston counties.
I love your voice. That's a great voice. All right. So thanks all for being here. You guys, I'm so excited for you to learn from these panelists. The goal is really to learn from them. They've all built some great relationships with landlords and learn and have you sort of learn what to do when conflicts does come up with landlords. So a couple weeks ago, THN did send out a survey, and we gathered questions to answer for this webinar. But we also just want to make sure that if you have questions that come up, feel free to put them in the chat. I believe you all can unmute as well. And so if you want to come off mute and ask your question as well, we'll try and reserve some time for that. So we'll start off with the questions that came in via the survey and then open it up to see what other people have. So I think let's start with sort of building that initial relationship with landlords. And we're going to turn to sort of Panhandle Community Services. So either Amy or Audra, what is the best way to sort of establish a productive working relationship with landlords?
I'll start and Amy can add too. I think one of the best ways is to set the expectation early on. What are you going to do for the landlord? How does your program work? What is going to be expected of our family that's in our program and the interaction with that landlord, and just generally setting an expectation for how things in a perfect world will go. Amy, do you have anything to add?
I think you said it great. I think just being transparent upfront with the landlords, and I know working with the staff that work in the rural snow program at our agency, they stay pretty good contact with the landlords throughout the process. Sometimes the landlords reach out to us before we know what's actually going on with the family as well. So I think just having that open relationship with them and knowing that you're there for both, I think helps. Um, but yeah, just that upfront transparency is the best.
That's great. So, oftentimes when you go to a landlord, they may have sort of myths or misconceptions. We obviously work with a population that may have a very limited income, have a criminal record, poor rental history. What do you do or talk about with landlords, or how do you sort of combat those myths with them when you start the relationship?
Um, I think just talking through that with the landlord, kind of letting them see that we understand that this is could be a difficult population. The population, there's a variety of things that could hinder sometimes like the criminal record and things. But I think um, letting the landlords know that we're aware of that and that we're gonna we're gonna be involved with that family, and that there's expectations that we have, and if those are not um, happening, or if we see issues, that those would be addressed as soon as possible.
I think additionally, we um, kind of went on a landlord recruitment campaign. And so we started dispelling those myths before we ever asked them to become a landlord with us. Obviously, we didn't reach everybody. You find a housing and that landlord may or may not have ever heard about us before. We also operate a housing choice voucher program. And so we've had to do some landlord, myth busting, as it were, to combat some of the things that are believed about just the HUD population in general. So um, we have landlord briefings a couple of times a year. We have landlord recruitment, and then we have also talked about putting housing facts on our social media. And so, but prior to ever trying to house anybody in this program, we had already laid the groundwork about what it meant to work with this population. And so we already had a little bit of that done, a foundation, and then we just built upon that with the transparency and our expectations, and just being real honest that people are messy and life is going to happen. And we're going to do our best to be present with that family. And we're going to go in and do home visits. But we encourage the landlord to be present at their own property. Like, don't wait a year to go in and see what's happened. And so really just open and honest communication.
Denisha and Sharon, is there anything in particular you do differently when talking to landlords about some of the vulnerabilities or things that come up with some of our clients?
So I can speak to that. The very first thing we have to do is reframe the way we think. And when we reframe the way we think, we will reframe the way the landlord thinks. And so what I'm trying to say is tenants have issues. All tenants have issues, right? If your landlords are housing humans, there's going to be an issue. And so when you start with the landlord, excuse me, when you start, Denisha, I think you're passing your nice sultry voice to me. So when we start with saying, I know that you have some you've had issues maybe with some tenants in the past that didn't belong to a program or they weren't coming from a low income housing. And who did you go to? They didn't go to anybody because they didn't have anybody. You have to create this village around you when you go to the landlord. And yes, I echo a lot of what Audra and Amy are saying. You have transparency, but when you make them realize that they're taking a gamble, it's a crapshoot with anybody. And if they have an affordable housing program, property to begin with, they're going to have the same issues that your clients have. The difference is they've got you, and your village could be you and your boss, or you and all your community partners. And when they know that they can get those issues resolved or someone just listens, you can develop these lasting relationships with landlords without ever really spending any money at all. In fact, I've gotten to where our landlords are coming to us and saying, what can we do to help you? How can let us fund this? Let us purchase this for you. I'm not buying them lunches or we don't have any money. We're like queens with no country, right? Like we have this program, but we don't have a bank account. So when you start reframing the way you think, then the landlord is reframing the way they see you and they see the clients.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Sharon and the other panelists that spoke, but it is about reframing. When I speak to landlords, I don't say participants or clients, I say tenants because that's the relationship that they have. I think when you keep it very business focused, because you're running a property, you're trying to make money, that's the end goal, right? What can we do to make sure that you can keep money at your property, keep this person housed? What are some of the resources we can pull in? A lot of our landlords, they're not familiar with the community resources. They have no idea, like, oh, I can have this hanging up in my leasing office in case somebody is behind on rent and they can just reach out and do this, or hey, maybe I can look. I know the Texas rent relief was a huge thing that we got calls on of, hey, what do we do? Who do we contact? Where do we go? And being able to have that connection where they're like, I'm going to have to pass your name on to somebody else because I know they don't work with affordable housing and they're completely lost. That also helped us with that landlord engagement. That word of mouth also was very powerful. But I definitely agree it's about maintaining the expectations, having really radically honest conversations with them, but also setting the understanding that there's a tenant and property relationship. We just so happen to be a support system that's a part of that on both sides.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so true that other people who are just coming in, off a Craigslist listing or something like that, don't come with that support system behind them. So it's really important when you're marketing to landlords to talk about that because that is really one of the sort of incentives that we have and reasons to hopefully get people housed from our programs. What about sort of the misconception that our unhoused neighbors will not maintain their units or will cause damage to the property? How do you sort of get ahead of that with landlords when you're talking to them?
I can I can jump out here and speak to that. So the very first thing again, it's that reframe work, right? So when you're transparent with the landlord about that particular tenant or tenants that you bring, and they are making that decision to house them with you, that's the very first thing. So when all the cards are on the table and they know what they're getting, they have the same amount of buy-in as you do. We made this decision together to accept this client. That's the first thing, right? Or excuse me, that tenant. So when you do that and they're in it with you, they can't say, well, you said no, you knew what you were getting, and we knew that there was a chance that there could be an issue. The difference is because they don't have this village, right, with the other tenants that they're housing, you can now step in and we can work through it together. Sometimes we resolve those issues. A lot of times there's a chance that maybe we can't resolve that issue and you put that tenant on a short lease, but we're all working together. I would deter from putting a tenant and landlord together right away. You want to speak to the tenant, you want to speak to the landlord. Only in a very rare case do you need to bring the tenant and the landlord together at the same time. But that could be a recipe for disaster if you're not prepared for that conversation. You want to temper that. And with me, my client is the landlord. So the tenant typically belongs to the case manager if they're still involved. If I don't have that and I'm the mediator and I'm walking the line between the two, I'm very careful about when I bring them into the space at the same time to mediate.
Yeah. Any other thoughts from the panelists on getting ahead of maintaining units or causing damage? I mean, I think in general, what Sharon's saying is right. You know, you don't know as a landlord what that person who you're housing is going to come and do. So that could happen with someone who comes off, again, Craigslist or something like that as well. Denisha, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with Sharon mentioned and even what you put in there, Katie. One thing that I've been able to leverage because we're like right in the back door of Houston, I'm like, hey, y'all get a lot of college students that like to party and damage stuff. And they can't afford it necessarily all the time. Like, how do you work those situations out? And they're like, oh my God, the parents, and da 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 da. And it's like, hey, we're coming in every month. We're checking in. You're welcome to come in here with us. You know, the individual's cool with it. We're cool with it. You're welcome to come in here with us. So I also try to put some responsibility back on that property, kind of like we were speaking to earlier of don't come in once a year. And I know that has been a previous thing with some other programs of like, hey, it's once a year we're going to show up. It's like, no, like this is your property. You're welcome to come in at any time. And we want this to be a working relationship because we can start picking up on, okay, this person's not cleaning up as much as they used to. Okay, we notice they're not putting in maintenance requests. What are the barriers, right? Do they not know how to work a new system? Hey, what can we do to talk about that? So really kind of tag teaming with the landlord to say, hey, if this one person is struggling with this new system, do you have any other tenants that may be struggling? And then that can open up a can of worms and they're like, oh, well, yeah, let me check in. So we really try to maintain that partnership and kind of bump that accountability on them because it's like you could have a bunch of college students in here tearing stuff up too. And then what's going to happen there? So that's been helpful for us, at least in the Houston region.
Yeah, that's great. So for Panhandle Community Services, you obviously just your rapid rehousing grant is fairly new. What kinds of outreach have you done in your community around landlords? I know you said you did this big push before the grant. What did you do? How did you set it up? I know we had a question about what can you provide to landlords as a welcome package. So what sort of stuff did you do in your area?
We did a couple of different things. Events are huge. They're probably huge everywhere, but having so many small towns that we have to cover, you know, everybody has something that we need to be part of. So I ordered coasters that looked like houses that said, help provide a family a home. And then we had little stress ball thing. Amy may have one handy, but anyway, like a stress ball, but shaped like a house. And it said, looking for landlords. And so we had a little bit of extra money
Nice.
that I could use to do those things. And then we just had a flyer that kind of talked about how we we're short of landlords and how long the average family is looking for housing. And we talked about if it was a presentation to like the Lions Club or the Rotary Club. We talked about that shortage, and we also talked about how helpful it is to house families and what we're looking for and some of the benefits of that. And so we generally, across all of our programs, just do a lot of outreach. And so we incorporated landlord engagement specifically. And sometimes you get landlords at those events, like the Rotary or the Lions Club. There may be landlords in that population. Some of those health events are not really the landlord population so much. They're more the families that we're serving. But the swag still goes out the door and it still gets taken places and it still nets an investment. One of the other things that we did with completely different money, but we have a minor league baseball team here, the Sod Poodles, if you're unfamiliar with what we call prairie dogs. But they were looking for things for their big signage. And so we did a landlord recruitment campaign through there that had a guy sliding into home plate. I'll put it in the chat here in a minute when I'm not talking. And so we went that route, and I was worried that it would be too small, but we got a lot of calls from that. And some of those panned out and some of those didn't. But we did not emphasize become a HUD landlord or become a landlord for rapid rehousing. We just said, we have families who need housed. You have houses. We need you. Let's partner, and we'll become a triangle. The family, us, the landlord, like, let's enter into this partnership together.
Audra, I always learn a new phrase from you. Sod poodles. Okay. Thanks for that. Yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Do you mind if I echo real quick? I think that is the biggest thing of going to those maybe non-traditional meetings, like the Rotary Club, the Lions Club. Um, we have like a new different club that I saw that I presented at, but it is a lot of landlords there. It's also a lot of people running for office. It's a lot of elected officials. It's a lot of your attorneys. So people who are on the other side of this system and debunking those myths, that's some of the best places to do it. But having those questions, because they'll ask and they'll be very straightforward with their question. And they're like, hey, okay, like, let me give you more insight. Let me give you more context to that. So I would definitely echo looking at some of those maybe non-traditional, not just your health fair, but who's your Rotary Club? Who are some other, I know we have like a cities association where all the city mayors and pro tems and all those people get together, seeing if you can get on something like that.
I sort of have a follow-up question. How much of this are you all doing throughout a average month? Like doing sort of this outreach to new groups or new people? And
I
just
would
for
say
anybody.
I would say a minimum if you want to keep it consistent, you need to do it a minimum of twice a month. But I would argue if you're new and you're just hitting the ground running, I would try to do it weekly, even if it's as simple as like an email of, hey, this is who we are, here's our information. We'll love to get you on the calendar to learn more. But I would definitely encourage like some monthly contacts.
I think it depends on the month. Not all months are created equal. And there are times that, so we've divided the panhandle into quadrants. And there are times that, quadrant one has 3 things going on the same Tuesday afternoon. And then nothing and so you have to redirect staff sometimes to get them where they need to be. And then there's other months where there's nothing going on and you need to create something or try to get on the local radio or whatever. But I would just echo kind of what she said, in that there is no bad place for you to talk about what you're doing and how people can help you, because they may not be a landlord, but their brother-in-law may be. And but there's no bad place for you to sing this song. Sing it often, and sing it loud.
Yeah, I concur, Audra, for sure. One of the things that I do is I give presentations to the Realtors Association. And just like somebody's brother is a landlord, somebody's sister or cousin is a realtor, and they are connected. Talk about 6 degrees of separation. You are going to meet a lot of people because realtors are connected in some form or fashion to a landlord, and they are your biggest mouthpiece. And it can be overwhelming sometimes because they're constantly calling you and asking you, hey, do you have someone? But just keep making those connections, and the landlords will come. Like literally, they will be there. They'll come out of the woodwork sometimes when you don't need them to, but they will. And then when they do, I just always make sure and tell them you can reach out. I don't have any maybe right now that fits what you have for your property, but please continue to reach out to me. So realtors, very important.
Very important. And I worked with a community, and this community definitely has more capacity, but they would call landlords once a week and just be like, hey, what's going on? I know you haven't rented to us yet, but would love to help you with any vacancies that you have. And they just kept a very consistent outreach. And eventually the landlord was like, all right, let's try this. And they suddenly, got access to a larger building, and built this relationship. But it's about consistency, and it's about building relationships with these folks, really learning about what exactly drives them, in terms of is it money? Are they looking to make the most money out of possible? Are they looking to house people out of their hearts? So really learning that and building that relationship based on that is helpful too. Do you all change your strategy at all versus like a small mom and pop landlord versus like some larger buildings? Do you do anything differently when you're talking to them initially?
I really don't. One of the things I try to do is have a big breadth of what I have. So I call the big box properties, I call them big box, the large ones, right? And then we've got the private property owners, which are phenomenal. And then we have those property managers that are housing, are managing different properties with different owners. My overall sell or spill, so to speak, is always the same. It's the transparency, it's the let's do this together. You have control over who you house. The other thing I found that when you have a variety of properties, everyone's in a different cycle, right? So right now, everyone has units this time of year. There's just seems to be an abundance of units. But once you get out of the holidays, there's different cycles. So when you have those different types of property owners, managers, you can continue to spread out. So that being said, I have many properties that I house a lot of people with, and I will spread out. So if I had a couple of problem issues with one landlord, the next time I will try. Clients can always decide where property they want to go to, but I will try to not steer to that property and spread it out a little bit. So kind of spread out some of the ones that you think may be more complicated down the road in terms of maintenance, just to give that landlord or that property a break, and try to see if they wouldn't mind going somewhere else.
That's
I
great.
don't really have a different approach either. I'm about to get myself kicked right off of this as a panelist. It's been nice seeing y'all. We have a big box. I'm sure everybody on this call has the same property big box store, but recently we were asked to partner with the Amarillo Apartment Association on an event, and so that was really good for us, and we got access to a lot of new landlords. But the secretary of this committee or event is actually one of the property managers for big box are us. And so we have 5 of those properties in Amarillo. They're known by Big Square. Not going to say their name, but anyway. And so I have been relentless in every meeting. When I walked in, I said, "Hi, how are you? Are you ready to talk to your corporate about taking our families yet?" And before we left, she was like, "This was a great meeting." I'm like, "Yes, are you ready to schedule that meeting to?" So, like, I'm relentless. I've not been successful, so take that for what it's worth. But and I have no doubt that that decision, somebody did something terrible at one of their properties or several of their properties for them to make a decision in 2001 that they are still holding to. But I think if everybody was harassing court, we might get somewhere. So anyway, again, not everybody's cup of tea, but if you get a chance to have somebody that is, their corporate just does not give you any access at all, and there's not even, like, talk about it. Talk about why that's a bad idea. Talk about you have empty properties, right? Like, you have empty apartments. I have people. Why don't we want to try this? Why don't you want to see what we can do for each other? So just be relentless.
Yeah. Oftentimes just using the word pilot. Like, can we pilot? Can we get 2 or 3 people into your properties? And you really do have to think about who we, this is a new relationship. We really want this to go well. Who do we think would do well in these properties? And obviously it's all about the participant choice, but thinking about that. And sometimes when you say this is a pilot, we'll see how it goes. This is the communication that we'll have during this pilot. This is what we promise to do and what our tenant will do. That could be a way of potentially getting in the door. Denisha, I saw you come off mute.
I think I have to agree with Audra on this one about being relentless. So I'm the person where I'm like, hey, I'm gonna drive to your office. So I've driven to Beaumont, I've driven to Sugar Land, I've driven to the north side of Houston because hey, let's sit down and let's chat. So I definitely echo, hey, let's sit down and meet. But I think it shows a level of commitment of I want to
Mhm.
make sure that I'm here for you. I want to make sure that we can maintain this relationship. And if we can't, I want your feedback. So I think that's the thing when it comes to those larger management companies, those properties themselves. The mom and pop ones, our biggest issue that we have is that they don't believe in fair market rent. They're just like, I want to keep this rent this low so I can help. And I'm like, okay, but can you pay your bills? Like, making sure we're kind of walking through it. And we love it because they're doing it out the kindness of their heart. But especially some of our programs in our area, we have more of an elderly population. So we lose folks. And that's pretty tough. I think with us being a local mental health authority, that we can leverage some of those tools that we have for them, of those mom and pops that build those relationships, get really close, but saying, hey, like, let's get you some grief resources because, yeah, that was a tenant, it was a business relationship, but it was still a relationship that you have with an individual. And I haven't seen that as much with some of the bigger properties. So that's kind of an untraditional approach that we have when it comes to in that front end engagement, but also how you maintain that engagement over time. But yes, if you have to drive to an office, call me. I'm happy to take a road trip with you.
Right. Well, there's 2 things I'd like to say to that too. And Audra, I've been in your shoes, and I concur with Denisha about being relentless. Is also not being afraid to go over their head. I can't tell you how many relationships I have made with regional property managers. Some of them I go to them first, and then they work backwards and say, "Okay, we're going to house this person." And so don't be afraid if you're not getting anywhere with her. Don't be afraid to go over her head. Find out when regional managers are always coming to their properties. Find out when they're coming and see if you can't get a meeting with that person. The other thing that I do, it doesn't work when they're on a grant and the grant won't allow it. But when I have a client that maybe has a number of background issues, a number of evictions, I will go to that property and say, will you give them 6 months and let them earn the other 6. And that's worked really well with all of my properties, whether it's big box or small. And it's so empowering for that tenant when at first it's like, well, they're only going to give me, yes, but you're going to go work or you're going to get a second job or whatever it is that's in their short term and long term goal. Like you can do this and then they will house you. Or maybe you've gotten to the point to where you'll go to another property and move up to a better grade of property. So don't forget about that 6 month lease.
Yeah. Um, Great. Well, don't forget to put questions if you have any in the chat. I think we can sort of move on to incentives. So we covered a lot of like, how do we build those relationships? How do we do outreach? How do we really talk to the landlords ahead of time? So now we've done that work. We've really had those discussions. They're knowledgeable about, the folks that we're working with and the support that we can bring. So what kind of incentives and strategies do you use at that point to then get them to actually sign on and start to house folks? So Denisha, this question's for you.
Yeah, so in our area, a lot of our properties do not like the word incentives. It just kind of makes their skin crawl because they're like, oh, my taxes. It's like, wait a minute, let's take a step back. So, making sure we're using common language, I've noticed has been like the biggest thing for us of what common language of like, hey, if I'm coming to you to say my program actually can do a double deposit, and maybe this is what it looks like. Is that something that your property's willing to work with? We've been able to leverage that, and that's been super helpful. Really open communication has been one of the greatest strategies that we've had. I've always let properties know, like, hey, our staff is not just there for once a month to check in on that tenant and then we, go into the next month. If you want to sit down and meet and just chat and learn more about our programs, if you have ideas about what else you can do as a property or as a landlord, like we're happy to sit down. One landlord gave me a really great idea that I implemented was doing the surveys, right? Doing landlord surveys and getting feedback of their experiences with affordable housing
Mhm.
programs and affordable housing units and what they would like to see. Is it even possible? I've sat down and went over regulations with properties to say, hey, this is kind of why we have that limitation. And, like, what are your thoughts there? What do you think are some things that we can do about that? So I've learned just having that collaborative brainstorming has also been a really kind of cool incentive that doesn't require
Mhm.
any money, right? It just requires your time and your ability to kind of do some research that has been super helpful for us. Also, the 6 month lease has been something that we have leveraged as well when individuals were uncertain if they wanted to stay at a property or a property wasn't certain if they wanted to go on a lease. I'm like, hey, like let's see if we can do a 6 month lease. Let me see if I can get the approval. And whatever you put the rate at is what we'll do, as long as it's within fair market. And that's really helped us maintain housing for a lot of individuals because, like Sharon mentioned, you get 6 months there, you got to earn the other six. Or hey, let's at least you got that 6 months of leasing history, and now you can go to a different property. So that's been really helpful. But if anybody's experiencing that pushback of like, oh, we don't do incentives, we can't do that, it's some type of taxing code that they have to worry about that puts a lot of landlords and stuff like their hairs on the neck kind of stand up behind. But
Hmm.
just letting them know, like, we just want to make sure that you feel good about going into this partnership because, like I think Sharon mentioned earlier, you make the final decision who gets to stay at your property, right? Like
Mhm.
that's your decision, that's your call. We're not going to push you to change your operations by any means, but we want to make sure that you have as much information as possible.
Yeah, that's great. Um, and um, and so are there other ways? I hear you, you're obviously having lots of conversations with them. But are there other ways that you keep landlords engaged and retained once issues arise?
Taking it on the chin. Like sometimes you just gotta fall on that sword and you gotta say, you know what, hey, we knew that person has had history. Yeah, we kind of talked about it. Yeah, we did all these things, but it didn't work out. And being okay with kind of taking that slap on the wrist sometimes, letting those landlords vent, again, within
Mhm.
professional, respectful boundaries, right? But letting them really give you that feedback of like why it didn't work and what could have been different. And sometimes what's available is not appropriate for people. And that's conversations that we should just be having across the board with landlords, with individuals, with staff of just because it's available doesn't mean it's appropriate or that person's ready for that. And then what does that look like? So those are some of the things that we've done on our end down here.
Hmm.
There's a couple questions in the chat pod.
Yes,
How
I
do you
see
handle the
them.
large properties that wait to send an invoice for repairs of a unit 7 months after the work has been completed and another tenant has already moved in? The work was done during the previous grant, so we are now unable to pull from the grant. It would have had to come from unrestricted funds. Have any of you dealt with this?
Denisha, do you want to talk about your experience?
Oh, we must be having the same type of issue with the same property in the same year. So yes, we actually just had that happen. Ooh, 3 months ago, I want to say. Thankfully, the tenant was still in the unit, so that's how we were able to come up with some of the money. But just letting them know, like, hey, this is what we have to adhere to. I always use like, hey, these are your tax dollars that we're using. So I
Mm,
want the same way you want me to be a good steward of it with anybody else, I have to be a good steward here. And if you have any other funds, like maybe some private funds that you can tap into, maybe there's like philanthropy in your town, which I know is not abundant across the state by any means, but seeing if that's an option to have a discretionary fund. But I would even give honest feedback to that landlord in the sense of, hey, for most programs, we probably could cover this, but this is what this will look like. Because a lot of properties don't know. It's the same way we're all running around like chickens with our heads cut off. They are too in their own realm. But just giving them that education and say, hey, this is what this would look like. Because again, there's not much that we can do here now. But in case it happened next time, you can have some of that education to be equipped to handle it hopefully better. But yeah, we just had that happen not too long ago.
yeah, and I think as you spoke earlier, you talk about trying to get the landlord to the property. And so if you're finding 7 months later, after someone else has moved, after your tenant has moved out and then someone else has moved in, when was the last time you were at this property? And why did it take 7 months to get me an invoice? I think like this could be something that you talk about early on in your relationship with the landlord to say, listen, like we can pay for damages, but that like these invoices, we need to know about the damage and have a reasonable amount of time, not 7 months, to get that information. Um, so yeah. Um, Let's see. I think, do any of you work with shared housing landlords? So just noting that if you have a continuum of care grant or even an emergency solutions grant and you're doing shared housing, that's when two unrelated people are living, two or more unrelated people who are not part of the family unit are living in a place together. They do have to have separate leases if you are using HUD funds to house them. So it is sometimes a little bit harder to get landlords to agree to that. So I'm not sure. Do any of you have any experience with shared housing?
I can tell you that over the years, I've had many of them reach out, and I never really had the capacity to go and vet. But we had someone that came up on our radar about 6 months ago that's doing co-living and they're doing private rooms. And it was enough to where we thought, hey, we need to really take a look at this because of what they were offering. So we vetted them. I don't, can't even remember, felt like I was driving to El Paso, but I drove to one of their facilities that was way out in the country, and I was quite impressed. So I then came and brought it to the community, and I said, hey guys, we have this co-living facility. It works when it works. And I say that because if someone doesn't mind sharing a kitchen and sharing a bathroom, but they could get a private room, they can actually maybe start to save some money. They get
Mhm.
in right away. There are still going to be some background checks. So keep that in mind if you're working with any of this, like Pad Split is one of the venues that they actually use, or the host that they use to do their background checks for many of them. It's great. It's not a long-term commitment, and that's the best part about it, especially for our clients that maybe just got evicted and you need to get them somewhere. And if you will take the time to go and vet, please, 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 because everybody out there is not on the up and up, and some of the places are bad. So just, I wouldn't put my name behind any of them before, and this one I 100% stand behind. So.
Yeah, it's a great way for people who are just coming out of homelessness to get, as you said, get housed quickly, pay a smaller amount, potentially live in a nicer place than they would have if they were on their own. I think I have some statistic like 70 or maybe more than that. And I'm not going to remember it off the top of my head right now, but most of us do live in a shared housing environment. It's not that we have a spouse, we have children, we have other people to help pay rent or our mortgage. And so within all of our work that we do with people experiencing homelessness, it's a great way for people to have a social life with a roommate. Definitely things come up just like it does with your spouse. But it really is like perfect for, maybe a short amount of time. It can be a permanent thing, but I think a lot of times when we're talking to clients, even if you're just talking about housing them in a single family, or their place on their own, this doesn't have to be your permanent location where you live for the rest of your life, but this is a way for you to get off the street, and get your foot in the door. Shared housing is great. It definitely has extra wrinkles. But like Sharon said, definitely vet that for a lot. So, let's see. Oh, okay. Michael, you have two affordable shared housing properties in Houston and Baytown. I would be open to housing your clients. Great. Well, love that. Um, let's make sure we get Michael's information so we can share it out with folks. Um, okay. Let's see. Um, so why don't we talk a little bit about just making sure we're maintaining a strong relationship with landlords, and how do we want to talk about, I mean, we talked a little bit about how we're handling issues, but we want to obviously make sure the landlord feels valued and heard. So what are things that you do, Sharon, that helps with that relationship?
The very first thing I can tell you is I don't run and hide from them when things go bad. You always have to be available and be responsive. And sometimes it's just simple things. Like if you know that you're going to be in a training the next day and you have a landlord that you're constantly in communication, or you guys got have a hot issue, let them know I'm going to be in a training until 3 o'clock and I'll get back to you after that. If you're going to be on vacation, let them know you're going on vacation. I always make myself available to them. And that goes a long way. It speaks volumes. It's the reason why they continue to take clients that they know are a high risk, because they know they'll be able to find me and we'll work through the issues. I can't give you the most valuable piece of information I can give you is to make yourself available and always be honest with the landlord. And that relationship will last through any damaged unit that could possibly come up in the process.
Yeah, I think certainly in another community I was working in, a lot of times a landlord just wants to vent and they have nowhere else to sort of vent or to. And so, unfortunately, you are that person, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do something or pay for something. It's just more sort of listening to them. Craig, I
Yes.
think you had a question. Oh, sorry, Sharon, go ahead. You can.
No, I was just going to also reiterate, and everyone's kind of touched on it a little bit, is that you have to validate the landlords, listen to them. It's one of those customers always right, but they know they're not always right. And I'm not afraid also to rebuttal and say, well, hey, let's try this, or why don't you do this? So it's also that, again, you have to know the landlord. It sometimes it comes over time with working with them. but it's always that communication that is going to set you apart from anything else that they are going to incur with any other tenant that they would take off the street.
I've got one for y'all. Do y'all create a separate contract for the landlord other than the lease? That way they're kind of held to a certain standard, like this 7-month-old invoice kind of thing. So it negates situations like that.
Audra, go
So,
ahead. Oh, sorry.
I was going to comment on what Sharon had said. So let's answer Craig and then circle
Okay,
back to the value thing.
go ahead,
so
Denisha.
Craig, at Gulf Coast Center, we actually have two contracts that the properties are required to sign. It's a lease addendum and it's a rental assistance contract. Our general counsel wrote those up, so they do override some of the things in the leases, and we have, lost out on properties because they're like, "Hey, my owner's not okay with that," things like that. And I'm like, "Hey, well, general counsel wrote it. That's an attorney. Y'all got y'all got to take that up with them." But just letting them know, like again, our goal, and we run a PSH project, our goal is that we want to make sure this person is adhering to their lease, right? So we're going to honor what's in that lease, but you're not going to send us a 7-month old invoice. That's not about to
Mhm.
happen because you'll hear from Linda Bell instead of Denisha Trials, and that's fine. But making sure that they read that thoroughly. I always encourage staff, I always encourage properties like, hey, read this thoroughly. Are there any questions that we can send over to our general counsel to make sure that you understand what you're signing off on? And even the tenant signs off on one of those documents to say, have you read this? Do you understand it? That we have a thing about inspections of the unit should always be in a safe, decent manner that would pass HUD regulations. And the properties are like, well, I don't know what happened. It's like, well, right here it says that you're supposed to be checking and you're supposed to notify this person, and this is how much time you have. So that helps us kind of cushion ourselves when we have kind of that back and forth. And even the biggest thing that we've seen, because we cover Galveston Island, is a lot of sales of properties,
Mhm.
and the new properties will come in, and old properties didn't have this, and we're able to say, "Hey, y'all are supposed to notify us 30 days when you begin a sale." It says it right here, so they're able to go back to that old property, and it kind of helps manage a staff stress level because we do have that paperwork. But yeah, we have those two documents.
Okay.
Yeah. Denisha, do you have, like, not to put you on the spot, but just what are some of the things that you have in that are not, that are separate from the lease? Can you think of, like, is it sort of like, do you have things about communication? It sounds like maybe you have to tell us within 30 days of a sale. What other things, if you can remember, are part of that extra
The things
document?
that stick out, well, the things that I've always get pushback on is the communication about selling the property, communication about the unit, communication about payment. So if they're having any concerns with payment, the tenant paid, this is kind of what they're expected to do. If it's our pay, this is what they're expected to do. Um, I'm trying to think who all can be in the household. And
Mm,
so, hey, if tenant, if you know that this person's in the household, this is how quickly you have to notify us. Property, if you know that this person's in the household and you're not saying anything, this is what's expected for you. So it's a lot of different, it's a lot of legalese. Let me say that, a
mm,
lot of legalese that's in there, but it's really been a good document for staff to always kind of fall back on. And we also have the contributions and one of them to say this is exactly how much this person is expected to pay. Tenant property, you cannot go outside of this. This is the base rent that we see in the lease. This is how much they're going to pay. This is how much this program is going to pay because it's within the fair market. You have to honor the fair market rent. And that one has been a lot of a pushback because we're near a lot of retirement communities. So
mm,
the rents are like through the roof. But we're like, hey,
mhm.
when you enter this agreement, this is what we had on the lease. This is what we agreed to, and you have to honor that. So
Yeah. Sharon, I saw you come off mute. Do you also have sort of an extra document, or do you have something that you want to add?
So, as the landlord engagement manager, I do not have a document. However, I house people from our community partners, and some I believe are, it seems like, are on this call, and they have their have rapid rehousing programs, TBRA, numerous different grants, and they require a separate document. Not all of them, but most of them do require, and then there are certain guidelines. And I will say, I recently had one this past year, and the landlord walked away and said, "No, I'm not going to sign this agreement." Um, had the right to do, but there's language in there that protects the agency as well as the tenant. So,
Mhm. Great. So I would love to hear sort of how you all handle issues between the landlord and tenants. I mean, we're dealing with people and different personalities, and so how do you work between issues if there are some issues between those two very important people?
Well, I guess I would say very carefully. We're currently navigating one of those, and it's been super unpleasant. Um, but I guess I will kind of piggyback on what I was going to say um, following Sharon is um, we you have to be mindful, um, especially in our community. I would assume in every community, but we had a very difficult landlord during our ESG days. And we were like, well, we're not going to house with him anymore. He doesn't do what's required. He's difficult. He is ugly to both the tenants and like, we're not going to work with him. Well, he bought the 2 apartment complexes in Borger. So not working with him is no longer an option if we want to house people in Borger, Texas. Because while there may be some independent rentals here or there, when you own the only 2 apartment complexes in a town, we're going to have to work with you. And so I think it goes back to not running, not hiding, good communication. And again, we don't have a lot of money to send, thank you gifts, but I think little things go a long way. You can send a thank you note. You can send a Christmas card from your housing team. You can send, and so you need to speak honestly about the issues, and I think having an extra document is a fantastic idea that lines all of that out. But you have to be mindful that you may have to continue to work with that landlord. And so you don't need to burn a bridge. You definitely don't need to be standing on the bridge while it's burning. So it gets tricky. And sometimes the landlord is just as much as fault or even more at fault than the tenant. But again, you have to navigate that carefully. And I think it's hard to say, well, this is how you do that, because it depends a lot on what the issue is and how we got here. And were they going to that unit? Were they appropriate when they were at that unit? Were we going to that unit? And were we having the conversations with the family that we needed to be having? Like, there's just lots of moving pieces, but I would say very carefully is my answer to your question.
Yeah. And it sounds like I think Sharon had it like before you were saying that you have the landlord and tenant meet ahead of time, like before the lease is even signed, so that maybe you see if there are going to be some personality issues or things that come up. Is that, do I have that correct?
Well, actually, most of my private landlords want to meet the tenant.
Mm-hmm.
They want to show them the unit. And that's the best thing ever, because you want one, they start bonding like immediately. And the landlord, yes, does the landlord come away with some preconceived connotations about the client? Absolutely, it happens. And I'm working, I'll work through that with the landlord, and they'll still move ahead, but they'll say, I'm not, I don't really have the best feeling. And then when something comes up later, it's like, remember when you said you didn't have the best feeling? Well, you're in, we're all in this together. You made the decision and you had 5 units open and you wanted to go ahead and do it. And so that's where, when everything starts to, start crumbling, they've taken responsibility and they know. And guess what? They keep doing it. They'll do it again and again and again, because when they have vacancies, they want them full, and they'll make those decisions. And it's the earnest is on them just as much as it is on you. Sometimes you don't even want them. I will be honest, There have been times where I want the landlord to say no because I see the disaster before and trying to stop the plane from crashing, and they do it anyway. And, we just all have to deal with it later when it all starts falling apart. So, have to be honest.
Yeah, Sharon, I have to agree with you on that one. It's definitely the conversation of natural consequences, right? Of the tenant has natural consequences, but so does the property. Like the property has its own set of natural consequences. I always encourage our individuals, hey, go out there and meet the property staff, see who you're going to be around. Is there anybody in that office that makes you feel uncomfortable? Do you feel like you're gonna have any challenges with anybody there? Okay, like, hey, let's role play that. Let's see how that work out because you may love the property manager and oh, we could chat and all this other stuff, but what if they're not there? And you have to talk to that staff that you don't necessarily care for. What do we do? Um, I know with a lot of our relationships, it's again, we have some of those property management companies that are coming in, especially in Galveston Island, because it's a huge tourist attraction. So they just are pushing people out and pushing people out. But we've had our share of, terrible property managers who were just trying to collect deposits and go. And we're like, okay, hey, we're going to take a step back and maybe not tell people that you have vacancies. And I've had full-fledged professional arguments with property owners of like, hey, that's not what we do, and they threatened to get their attorneys to sue me, and this is the state law. And I'm like, well, federal regulations trump state law, so that's okay. I get you don't like this person, and that's the issue. You don't like this person. It's not about the state law or the regulations. You don't like this person, and you have a right not to like them. I'm not asking you to
Mhm.
like anybody, but that doesn't mean I don't like them. They have to get off my property today. That's not how that works. And my major question that I always ask properties and tenants alike, hey, what would you do with anybody else in your life? When you have an issue with another tenant, like how does that work out? Think of the tenant that you actually like. How would this work out? And kind of getting them again, kind of grounding and reframing to that space of, are we doing this just because we don't like this person? Or are we doing this because this person really did violate something, right? If they really violated something, okay, we'll move on to the next process. But if there's an issue of like, I just don't care for this person, they're difficult to deal with, well, you're an adult, the same way that person is an adult. You're not going to like everybody you encounter, but what can we do to make sure that you both can be successful, whether it's coming to the end of this lease and saying, okay, we can renew, or hey, maybe let's not do that because this isn't a good fit. And it's okay if it's not a good fit.
Yeah. We have another question in the chat, and please keep them coming. What do we do if we make a great connection that's solid with properties and other employees within the agency undermine that relationship? You could lose those relationships due to that. Do people, anyone in particular have a want to talk about that?
I feel like we all work on the same team right now. I feel like we all work on the same team. We have those experiences ongoing actually because again Gulf Coast Center is a mental health agency, so we have some folks in our clinics that are like, let's get them housed, they have mental health diagnosis, they should get this and that. And I'm like, whoa, 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 that is not the message that we have established with these properties. Let's reel it back in. One thing that we have done, especially if it's folks that's like internal or folks external that we work with really closely, let's develop a common message when we're
Mhm.
referring people over. What is the care, right? What's the thing that we're trying to sell? What are we letting people know about the programs that we have, right? Whether it's that person has their own individual income and we're just providing the case management, or if we're providing case management and some rental assistance dollars. What does that actually look like? Because they can't hear one message from a manager over here, and then I'm telling them something different, and now they're all jumbled up and confused because they don't know which way to look. So I would encourage you to maybe sit down with some of those folks and say, hey, it seems like there is some confusion. Let's try to figure out what the common message is because we all have the common goal of wanting to see people get housed. Like we know that we're in the same fight together. But what is the common message going to be when we're working with, again, these are still our community partners.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think another opportunity is, you know, again, even the employees in our agencies, we're people too, and maybe we make a good one. Someone has a good connection with the landlord, another person doesn't, and they don't, have enough in common or whatever it is. If you have enough staff and have the capacity, that person who's made the great relationship, maybe they're the point of contact for that landlord. like make sure that that's the person that they would call if they have any issues or if they have are looking for vacancies. And maybe that person who doesn't get along as well has other connections within the community with other landlords, and they're the point of contact. So if you're able to do something like that, that could help too.
Katie, that's a great point. And actually, landlord engagement in our county, in Denton County, was born out of housing navigation. I started off as a housing navigator, and other agencies started to have housing navigators as well. And working within the confines of our grant, it was like, okay, how do we differentiate? Because one of the things we were hearing from landlords, they were complaining about the calls, complaining about having all of the relationships with all of the agencies. I mean, the guys stopped answering their phones because they were just getting hounded. So when we clearly defined what is housing navigation, what is landlord engagement, that means I, so to speak, am the mouthpiece, allegedly, the way it's supposed to work for the county. And if you send the referrals through landlord engagement, I'm navigating that relationship, and the landlord isn't having to have so many. Yes, you can still have contact with the landlord, but when it comes to housing them, what's going on with the client, if you have that person, like you said, a spokesperson, then it works really well. And then I'm trained to do what I do, and maybe not everybody is. And so that's where some of that, the conflicts, dropping the ball, case managers are super crazy busy, right? It's not always intentional, but my job is only to deal with landlords, and that's 100% of where my time is being spent.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And I know that um there it's very low capacity in terms of everybody is really low capacity. You're a case manager. You're also trying to go out and have relationships with landlords and deal with this and that. I, if it's possible within sort of your local homeless coalition or your region to have this one person who can be the centralized landlord engagement person, I can't stress that enough. We've done that in COCs, so not just in like little areas, but across COCs. And every, it's funny because when you start to talk to the housing navigators at different agencies, they're all like, well, we have our special unicorn landlords that only work with us. And then you talk and then you get people together and actually sharing sort of the landlords, and they're like, oh wait, we're all working with these same people. And you do have a couple landlords that say, oh, I'll never work with this agency again or what this agency. But for the most part, if you can come together as a region or county or an area and have sort of one person who can be that very strong message, same message, can very consistent message, and can be that person that landlords go to, that is huge. And it saves time for case managers. It saves time for the landlords because you're right. They're not having to take calls from 10 different agencies. They're just talking to one person. So if it is all possible, that is a fantastic strategy. Let's see, we're getting some more people in the chat. So, okay. Wendy's question: how would you approach a situation where multiple tenants have been successfully housed through a private landlord, but concerns arising from one tenant's behavior have made the landlord hesitant to continue future collaborations? What strategies can be used to resolve the conflict and preserve the positive working relationship, especially when the landlord has already provided the tenant with several opportunities to correct the issues? Additionally, what is the best way to manage tenant landlord conflicts in such cases? I'm not sure if someone wants to jump in and answer that.
I
So in
don't
that case,
exactly have
oh,
this
please go off. Sorry.
situation, but we, in one of our towns, we have an apartment complex who was pretty much the very first one to agree to work with us. And we have several tenants there. And it's kind of become its own like Peyton place, like everybody. But we did have an issue where one of the tenants decided that he was going to create his own animal rescue shelter in his brand new apartment. And so uh, we were on that before the landlord was on that. So that doesn't exactly answer your question, because obviously it's made it to the landlord and but we talked to the tenant about your tomfoolery cannot jeopardize other people being housed. Natural consequences. This was the first landlord in town to work with us. You were the second person he housed. Like, you want to be a good example. But ultimately, I think in your particular situation, you need to point out all of the ways that this has worked well, and how are you going to deal with this one bad apple. But don't judge everybody else, because you've had a lot of success, and so there's no reason to throw the whole fruit basket out. You just need to remove one apple and probably do some expectation setting with the people who are left. Because the worst behavior that gets tolerated, whether it's with your children or your employees or the worst behavior that gets tolerated is what becomes acceptable. So, you just got to deal with that.
We have one of our partner agencies, and some of them are on the line. They do a great job. One of the things they do is classes for how to be a good tenant. And while you can't do that on a large scale all the time, you certainly can educate those clients. And something that I have done, I personally will go and speak with, because it's not uncommon for me to house people and not meet the tenant because the case manager is actually working that end of it. But I will actually go, depending on the background and what's going on, I will actually have a conversation with them myself and reiterate, here's what's going to happen, and if you're not a good tenant. So just how to be a good neighbor. And we also sell that to the landlords, like they are getting this education in what they can do and do their part. Does it always work? No, of course not. Because one of the first things they want to do is help all their friends, right? If you're living in an encampment for a couple of years, you've got 15 people you want to help and you want to move them on in. And so we have a lot of that on the back end, but that certainly helps. And the landlord knows and appreciates when they're getting that education and you're informing them about that.
Yeah. Let's see. Kelly asked, do any agencies start the rental process with the complex property managers, landlords with a program agreement or another simple form to start the process with properties?
Katie, I just wanted to touch base on that previous question.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
One thing that we have done at Gulf Coast Center and THN actually helped us refine this is have a client agreement and an occupancy agreement. So we have actually laid down the expectations of, hey, not only do you have to adhere by your lease, but you also have to adhere to this. And a lot of the information we have in there is pulled from a standard lease. So you have to follow their guest and visitors policy as you sign in the lease. You have to do X, Y, and Z as you have signed in the lease. So I think that has helped us out to come back and say, hey, actually, not only are you causing a disturbance at the property, but you're also violating the program that you're a part of. Is this the best fit? Does this make sense for your life right now? Right? What would make the most sense? What are the barriers? And we deal with folks who have a array of disabilities, some that have very significant mental health disabilities as well. And we know that psychosis and other things come into that. So we don't mind having those conversations, but having those really honest conversations of no one put a gun to your head to sign this stuff, right? Like we made sure we went over it. We made sure there was a clear understanding. We're visiting it with you every month. What is the barrier? And maybe the barrier is this isn't the best property for you. And that's fine if it's not. Let's figure out a way to get you out of this property because this landlord has had success with our folks. So it's not the landlord and they're doing everything wrong. They've had success, but maybe you two just aren't a good fit, and that's okay. But let's see how we can transition you to a different property or to a different connection in the community to better suit your needs because maybe this isn't the most appropriate for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, the more you can also work with landlords to say, if we do have to move someone out, we are going to try to show your property and get someone moved in as quickly as possible, also can be helpful. So. So I'm not sure if anyone, Tanisha, sorry.
I can chime in on Kelly's statement or question about the rental process with the properties, with the agreement, with the simple form. Um, I've always shared like a fact sheet, just like a quick fact sheet of like, hey, this is what you can expect. Typically, until they start rolling the ball, we won't roll ours. So we'll, do the inspection. Hey, is this even an eligible unit? Does it pass the safety regulations that we're looking for? But I found when you start getting those financial documents involved and all these other things, it just creates a mess on the other end that you really don't want to deal with. So I would really encourage folks to kind of go in order as they need to. And I know, trust me, I'm going to look right into the camera. I know there is a sense of urgency. I do understand. Trust me, I get it. It's difficult to turn the key and go into your house knowing that somebody's sleeping outside. I understand. But it is more difficult to try to get out of a lawsuit when you owe a property money for financial things that we just didn't do things in order. So I would definitely encourage folks to learn how quickly properties can move. If they're like, hey, we can do a tentative lease and then we can get all this stuff done. Okay, let's figure out what that process looks like. But we will not release funds or release any money until all of this is done. Because I've seen it go the other way and it's been very, very messy for a lot of folks. So,
Yeah. Um, I think just in general, THN has mentioned potentially wanting to make standardized documents, either marketing documents or other things to help with landlord engagement. I'd love to hear from folks, in the chat or coming off mute potentially. What kind of documents would you like to see THN create that could help you with your landlord engagement? Or if you have something that you use that you think like works very well, share maybe not share the document, but what does that look like in your community? For the panelists, is there a document that you think is like fantastic, that works well in your community? So Christy thinks pros and cons of working with THN. Okay.
This form is not specific to rapid rehousing. We are a community action agency, and this form, for lack of a better word, this group of things really came out of serving families in our parking lot during COVID. But we have a fraud policy and an appeal policy and a consent policy. And then we have what we hope we never have to use, but our disruptive person policy that can end in termination of us serving you. But I think one of the things that form does, and we've only really had to use it to its full potential of not serving someone twice in the last nearly 5 years. But it sets some expectations for what we expect. And it's not harsh. It's not, it's really basic things that how people should engage. And so if you have never, if your mom was a yeller and you've learned to be a yeller, and so yelling comes naturally to you, it gives us an opportunity to kind of have that conversation right up front, very close to the beginning, before we get very far in, because it's really part of an application process for all of our programs, not just our housing program. And our team is not allowed to just hand you that and have you sign it, because it is such a important document, and it does tell you how you can appeal and how we define fraud and those things. They have to go over it with the family that we're serving. And so I just, again, it's not specific to housing, but I would say that it really does help us with some of that expectation setting right from the get-go.
Great. Thank you, Audra.
Katie, I think we talked a lot about myth busting in the populations that we serve. So I feel like that would be a good form document that would be universal to um, any agency that's serving that has any kind of housing program.
Yeah, absolutely. We have about 7 minutes left. So do folks have additional questions for panelists? Are you all wanting to get to lunch? Um, anything coming up or panelists, is there anything we didn't cover that you would love to share with the group? Okay. All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. I hope this was helpful in talking through some landlord engagement strategies. Thanks to THN for bringing this group together. I think you heard it a lot from the panelists, being open and honest, building those relationships with landlords, is really key to making sure that there is, a successful and to maintain that relationship even when there are some issues that come up because people are going to people. So, but yeah, so thank you everybody. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and I think we can close out the webinar.
Sounds good. I will send the recording to everybody that was registered as soon as it's processed. Again, thank you for all of our panelists. It's been super informative today. And let's all go to lunch. Bye, y'all.
Thanks all.
Thank you.